We'll now begin with roll call. Canada.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. Canada is present.
Thank you. Cuba.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. Cuba is present.
Ethiopia.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. Ethiopia is present.
India.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. India is present.
North Korea.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, fellow delegates. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea is present.
Poland.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. Poland is present.
Russia.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. The Russian Federation is present.
Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, fellow delegates. Saudi Arabia is present.
South Korea.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, fellow delegates. South Korea is present.
Ukraine.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. The government of Ukraine is present.
USA.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. The United States of America is present.
UAE.
Thank you, Honorable Chairs and fellow delegates. The United Arab Emirates is present.
Bangladesh.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. The People's Republic of Bangladesh is present.
Were there any delegates not called? Are there any points or motions on the floor? USA.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. The United States of America motions to open the speakers list with a speaking time of 30 seconds.
Thank you, delegate. Are there any other points or motions on the floor? Bangladesh.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. The People's Republic of Bangladesh motions to open the speakers list with a speaking time of 45 seconds.
Thank you, delegate. Are there any other points or motions on the floor? Canada.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. Canada motions to open the speakers list with a speaking time of 1 minute.
Thank you. For the purposes of today's committee, we will be motioning on USA's 30 seconds because of our short period of time. So the USA's motion all those in favor of the USA's motion for a 30-second speaking time to open the speakers list, please raise your placards now. All those against? This motion passes. USA, would you like to speak first or last?
First, please.
All those wishing to be added to the speakers list, please raise your placards now. Cuba, Poland, Russia, Ethiopia, South Korea, India. All those not called and wishing to be added to the speakers list, please send a note to the dais. You have the floor, USA?
Yeah, for a question.
Go for it.
Are we coming up front or speaking
You
on our
can.
seats?
I think it would just be easier if you stood up in your chairs, just so it's going to just take a lot of extra time for you to come up here and then speak. So,
Sounds fine.
thank you. You have the floor for 30 seconds. Oh, and just for a point of clarification, I will be knocking twice at 20 when you have 10 seconds left in the 30 seconds, and then once at 30.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, since 2009, an estimated 1 person every second has lost their home due to natural disaster or a man-made disaster. And according to basically all science that is available to us, that number is going to get worse every year due to climate change. So that means that the time to act to decrease response time by human rights commissions is now. Thank you.
Thank you, delegate. Cuba, you have the floor for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. As Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states, everyone has the right to adequate housing, with agencies such as the United Nations often being the first on the ground after major disasters. We need to find ways to accelerate our process of short-term shelters and transitioning it into the long term. I believe this committee needs to focus on that topic. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Poland, you have the floor for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. Last year, hundreds and thousands of people lost their lives and homes due to man-made and natural disasters because of the lack of long-term and short-term shelters. Poland urges this committee to address this issue and the efforts of reconstruction, as it is very pertinent to countries. Thank you.
Are there any points or motions on the floor? South Korea.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, fellow delegates. South Korea motion to set the agenda in the following order. Topic 3, addressing long and short-term needs through shelter needs through reconstruction efforts, followed by Topic 2, expanding women's rights, and Topic 1, targeting religious intolerance.
Are there any points or motions on the floor? UAE.
Thank you, Honorable Chairs and fellow delegates. The United Arab Emirates moves to set the agenda in the following order. Topic 2, expanding women's rights, followed by Topic 3, addressing long and short-term shelter needs through reconstruction efforts, followed by Topic 1, targeting religious intolerance.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any other points or motions on the floor? Ethiopia.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. Ethiopia motions to set the agenda in the following order. Topic 1, targeting religious intolerance, followed by Topic 2, expanding women's rights, followed by Topic 3, addressing long and short-term shelter needs through reconstruction efforts.
Thank you, Delegate. We will now be voting on order in order received, starting with South Korea's motion to set the agenda in the order of Topic 3, followed by Topic 2, followed by Topic 1. All those in favor of this motion, please raise your placards now. All those against? This motion clearly passes. Are there any other points or motions on the floor? Oh, we will now exhaust the previous speakers list and start a new speakers list. So, all those wishing to be added to the speakers list, please raise your placards now. UAE.
What an inquiry?
Yes, Delegate?
Would South Korea be added to the speakers list first because it was our motion to set the agenda?
Okay. Yeah. So as South Korea.
And then UAE was next.
Canada. Saudi Arabia, India, Russia, and Cuba. All those wishing to be added, all those not calling wishing to be added to the speakers list, please send it up to the dais. South Korea, you have the floor for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. South Korea is delighted that the committee has decided to discuss the issue of addressing long-term and short-term shelter needs through reconstruction efforts first in this committee, because we believe that it is a critically important issue because of the sheer number of conflicts and, as the United States mentioned, the rising threat of climate change. And for this reason, we believe that this is such a serious issue, and we need to establish continuity as well as maintaining sovereignty and community-based education. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. UAE, you have the floor for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Honorable Chairs and fellow delegates. The United Arab Emirates echoes the sentiments from South Korea, and we are more than pleased to be discussing reconstruction efforts through short and long-term approaches. We believe that natural disasters as well as post-conflict situations are drastically plaguing the international community. It is imperative that we develop short and long-term approaches to mitigate the situation. We need intergovernmental organizations as well as non-governmental organizations to work in unison with governmental structures in order to solve this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Canada, you have the floor for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. Canada believes that it is imperative that we draw a connecting line between short-term and long-term sheltering for these people. So when disasters first hit, we need to establish a baseline, a rapid response team, for example, in order to set up short-term housing for these people. And after their needs are assessed, they can be moved into long-term housing. In order to do this, we need to first utilize a bottom-up approach. And in order to do that, we need to utilize the actual populations in need to find ways that we can help them help themselves. Thank you.
Are there any points or motions on the floor? Ukraine?
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. Ukraine motions to set... I apologize. May I restart? Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. Ukraine motions for a 3-minute moderated caucus with a speaking time of 30 seconds on the topic of addressing long-term reconstruction needs. Thank you.
Are there any other points or motions on the floor? Bangladesh?
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. The People's Republic of Bangladesh motions for a 4-minute unmoderated caucus.
Are there any other points or motions on the floor? Saudi Arabia?
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. Saudi Arabia motions for a 6-minute unmoderated caucus.
Are there any other points or motions on the floor? India?
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. India motions for an unmoderated caucus, a 3-minute unmoderated caucus.
We will now be voting in order of most disruptive, starting with Saudi Arabia's motion for a 6-minute unmoderated caucus. All those in favor of this motion, please raise your placards now. All those against? That motion clearly does not pass. We will now be voting on Bangladesh's motion for a 4-minute unmoderated caucus. All those in favor of this motion, please raise your placards now. This motion does not pass. We will now be voting on India's motion for a 3-minute unmoderated caucus. All those in favor of this motion, please raise your placards now. This motion does not pass. We will now be voting on Ukraine's 3-minute moderated caucus with a 30-second speaking time on long-term reconstruction needs. All those in favor of this motion, please raise your placards now. This motion passes. Ukraine, would you like to speak first?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You have the floor for 30 seconds.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. Ukraine believes that long-term reconstruction needs must be addressed today by this committee by the impending doom of natural disasters and man-made disasters through war-torn territories and through the effects of natural disasters occurring because of the results of climate change. In Iceland, there has been an increased threat of 6 volcanic eruptions and earthquakes starting in late January with 3-point magnitude higher in the last 48 hours, and we need to address the long-term reconstruction needs for this nation and for nations across the globe. Thank you.
All those wishing to speak, please raise your placards now. Just for clarification, wait until I'm done with my sentence before you raise your placards. All those wishing to speak, please raise your placards now. Cuba, you have the floor.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. Cuba believes that this assembly needs to look at past efforts for reconstruction and see why the process to achieving self-sufficiency of the displaced communities took so long, and how we can address ways to improve our response times and our reconstruction times. Cuba believes that the focus needs to be on short-term to long-term transitions and why public funding and interest dissipates through time. Thank you.
All those wishing to speak, please raise your placards. USA.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. The USA believes that the future of long-term shelter support will come from non-governmental organizations. We need to increase the support that we provide NGOs, and we need to encourage them to act as fast and for as long as they can. We also need to look at local government's budgetary needs, and we need to devise budget plans that can last long to provide the most quality of shelter care and make sure that citizens do not go without adequate long-term shelters for too long. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. All those wishing to speak, please raise your placards. I will be calling on 2 people just to expedite the process. North Korea, Bangladesh. You have the floor for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. North Korea resonates with the sound of what I'm hearing. We do agree that we need to be establishing long-term solutions for the shelter, but the difference between long-term solutions and the ability for the country to reconstruct and build the longest-term solutions, the longest-term shelters, is what we find the most important. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. The People's Republic of Bangladesh strongly echoes the sentiments expressed by all of the delegates here today, but it most likely wants to focus on North Korea's sentiment that the longest-term solutions are what we need to be focusing on. And the Republic of Bangladesh strongly agrees. Focusing on community-based efforts, bottom-up approaches involving these individuals and the government's intergovernment systems in the construction of long-term shelters is the best way to determine a solution that will stand the test of time and actually prevail and allow these people to not only have actual lives, but preserve their dignity as individuals and live out lives to the most normal capacity that they possibly can. Thank you.
I will now be calling on the last speaker for this moderated caucus. All those wishing to speak, please raise your placards now. South Korea.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. South Korea would like to address Cuba's question of why public interest fades over time and why support for reconstruction efforts fade over time after disaster. And the reason why this is because something else happens somewhere else and the public attention is diverted. But that does not mean that the previous disaster has been fixed. It does not mean that reconstruction is complete. And that is why South Korea echoes the sentiments of Bangladesh. The longest-term solutions are the ones that involve community-based bottom-up approaches. Because these are the people whose homes have been destroyed. These are the people who are going to continue to care about themselves, and that's why these are the people that we must teach to rebuild and go on with their lives. Thank you.
Are there any points of motions on the floor? South Korea.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. South Korea motions for a 5-minute unmoderated caucus.
Are there any other points of motions on the floor? Ukraine?
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. Ukraine motions for a 4-minute suspension of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any other points of motions on the floor? Ethiopia?
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. Ethiopia motions for a 6-minute suspension of the meeting.
All right. Thank you, Delegate. We will be now voting on in order of most disruptive, starting with Ethiopia's motion for a 6-minute unmoderated caucus. All those in favor of this motion, please raise your placards now. This motion does not pass. Sorry. Sorry, that was my fault. I did not ask for who is against this. So we'll do that again. All those in favor of this motion, please raise your placards now. All those against? This motion does not pass. We'll now be voting on Ukraine's motion for a 4-minute unmoderated caucus. All those in favor of this motion, please raise your placards now. This motion passes. You are now in a 4-minute unmoderated caucus.